Todd Rogers, aka Mr. Activision, Toddzilla, and the king of video games, is known for holding a ridiculous number of gaming records, along with being the first pro gamer. If you watched my video, 10 speedrunners who were caught cheating, you'll know that Todd has been caught lying about getting a 5.51 and a 5.54 in Dragster, a racing game for the Atari 2600. This has been confirmed by tool-assisted speedruns, independent analysis of the game's code, and recently by Ben Heck, who took apart an Atari 2600 to find out what the fastest possible time was. All of these sources show that a 5.57 is the fastest time you can get in this game. He actually received a Guinness World Record for a time he never got. But something about this situation didn't sit right with me. It was way too silly. Who would lie about getting a record in such a tiny random game with only 300,000 sales? Really, no one knows or cares about this game at all. Turns out, this wasn't just some slip up in Todd's career. This wasn't a kid in 1982 wanting fame and lying about a single record. This is just the tip of the iceberg. Todd has compulsively lied for decades, claiming to have achieved an untold number of records, which I can prove are fake. He got a Twin Galaxies employee, who's now in prison, to lie about witnessing scores he never had. He has been caught entering his own scores into the Twin Galaxies database without verification. He's had multiple records wiped clean after they've been proven fake, and yet somehow this guy is still taken seriously. So let's get started. Let me show you how this man is the biggest cheater in gaming history. Once I suspected that there was more to this story, I started contacting as many people as I could that had connections to Todd. The best piece of information that I received was from former Twin Galaxies employee Wolf Morrow. Here's a quick intro into Wolf's experiences at Twin Galaxies. I used to work for Twin Galaxies some years ago, but hated it. My brother and I were constantly having to fight with what I call the old guard, comprised of record holders from the early 80s. First, they resisted every one of our innovative new ideas, like speed gaming records for consoles. And then later, we discovered a lot of the records from the 80s were bogus because video proof was not required back then. The worst was Mr. Activision, aka Todd Rogers, where I and several others were able to prepare a case and conclusively prove Todd had been completely fabricating world records for various Atari games. And here's what Wolf said about Todd in his email to me. I quickly learned of his celebrity status with Twin Galaxies and being Mr. Activision because nobody, and I mean nobody, could touch him at any Atari Activision game he set records for. It was made clear that Todd was untouchable and unquestionable. I like to gauge how tough the world records truly were by practicing on the game in question. When I started testing various Atari 2600 records already long established by Todd in the Twin Galaxies database, that's when I began to realize things weren't adding up. I would take a game like Barnstorming, for example, get within the top 5 of the logged records for it, only to realize that Todd's #1 score/time seemed flat out unreachable by a long shot. Indeed, the second place times were nowhere near what Todd got, and I began to smell BS. I mean, we're talking about tracks that you finish in mere seconds, yet Todd's first place time was revealing what seemed to be the impossible. Enter Ron Corcoran. Mr. Corcoran was the ref that took responsibility for logging and verifying Todd Rogers' records. I would later find out they were friends. When I read this, I thought, great, I have the name of the guy who verified all of Todd's ridiculous records. I need to talk to this guy. But it turns out you can't, because he's serving 30 years in prison for repeatedly raping a little girl. So super high quality referee we've got here. I'm sure he's a super honest guy. You might say, this Wolf guy, he's just one person. How do we know Ron Corcoran was really in charge of entering Todd's scores? We know this because Todd himself has told us. There were some 1,700 of my scores that were lost from the database or point blank just never put into the database by Ron. Gone were several tapes proving scores that are in question, including my 14 videotape 85-hour marathon on the Atari 2600 Journey Escape. After Ron's trouble was settled, Brian King got the tapes back from the police department, as Robert had been retelling over the years, but he was only given approximately 125 tapes from the police, of which just one was from Robert, and just 25 or so were from me, and no other tapes were returned by the police. Just 25 tapes attributed to me could in no way at all begin to represent the totality of what was sent to Ron. This is the most important piece of evidence, because now we know for certain that it was Ron who was in charge of entering Todd's scores and who kept all of the evidence. It turns out after Ron got arrested, all the tapes in his home were seized by the police, understandably, but unfortunately for Todd, they just never returned the tapes that prove these 1,700 scores of his. The issue with that claim is that we can check. I called the Glendale Police Property Unit, and they informed me that every single tape that was seized from Ron's home was returned. So all the tapes that prove he got these scores very likely never existed in the first place. But you know what? That doesn't mean they didn't happen. Let's take a look at some of these records. First, Todd's amazing time of 32.04 seconds in Barnstorming, another game made for the Atari 2600, published in 1982. The objective of this game is to fly to the end, going through every barn and avoiding all obstacles. Every time you adjust your height, you lose a little bit of horizontal speed, so the smaller your turns, the faster your time. There are 4 difficulties. Todd's record was set on the easiest difficulty, Game 1. In 2002, Jeffy Ahrensmeyer made this post to the Atari Age forums in disbelief that Todd had achieved a 32.04 time. Well, thankfully, our friend Wolf saw this, and this is what happened. Todd's record, which stood for many years, was proven to be impossible once we broke down the game code and stripped the stage of any obstacles. With the stage completely blank, flying a line to the finish was slower than Todd's record. When we presented this evidence, we were attacked by fans and supporters of Todd, and eventually an excuse was cooked up that I lovingly refer to as the coffee stain excuse. Yes, after being attacked and told we were clueless about how good Todd was, one of the referees covered for him and claimed the document detailing his record had a coffee stain on the part where the record time was listed. Instead of throwing the record out and forcing Todd to do a legit one on videotape, they simply adjusted the record to be maybe possible by adding a half second to the time. And this is where his second fake time of 32.5 came from, which is also impossible. What really stood out to me, though, was that according to Wolf, a Twin Galaxies referee blatantly lied to help Todd cover his tracks. I asked Wolf about this, and what do you know? He told me the Twin Galaxies referee who lied about having a coffee-stained photo, which never existed in the first place, was Ron Corcoran. Who would have thought? But it doesn't even matter that this ref who verified Todd's records is a lying child rapist, because we can prove that Todd's 32.5 is fake on our own. What you're seeing on screen right now is the tool-assisted speedrun by Alyosha, which beats the game in 32.69 seconds in-game time. Tool-assisted speedruns are created by going through the game frame by frame and entering inputs to create a theoretical best run. So here you have the theoretical best time of 32.69, nowhere near 32.5 in a race this short. Just like he did with Dragster, Todd was caught lying about an impossible record, so he decided to lie about getting a second impossible record. Wolf eventually confronted Todd himself and sent him this message on Facebook. First off, you and I both know the things you did at Twin Galaxies were highly unethical, and frankly it made me very bitter how Mike and I were treated like the bad guys when we stood up for the integrity of the Twin Galaxies database. Ron covering for you and flat out lying for you really just made it even worse. We had to prove your record was bogus before anything got done about it, because both you and Ron swore it was 100% legit. On top of all that other crap, you're caught entering your own scores on the C64 format without submitting full verification to the proper ref. To make things worse, many of those scores were very suspect anyway. Todd was able to enter his own scores into the Twin Galaxies database because he was an employee of Twin Galaxies and a referee himself. Now here's part of Todd's response. This brings me to the heated issue of me entering my own gaming scores into the Twin Galaxies database that Wolf so talks about. This sentence is kind of hard to follow, but stick with me. I have admitted in recent times, since I no longer am employed by Twin Galaxies, on both forums and interviews, when it came to the topic of me entering my own scores into the Twin Galaxies database, that I did, but on a small scale and only one time. We were not able to discuss such matters while we worked for Twin Galaxies due to the NDAs that we signed, and if it were discussed, it would have compromised the integrity of Twin Galaxies brand itself. So there you have it, folks. Yes, I entered my own scores into the Twin Galaxies database, but it was just a few and only one time, I swear. It doesn't make it any better even if it were only one time, but this guy lies so much I don't even buy that. I'd bet good money this guy entered his own scores many times while he worked there. And then he says if he had told anyone he'd entered his own scores, that would have compromised the integrity of Twin Galaxies. No, dude, entering your own scores in the first place was enough to do that. Here's another record that's under dispute. This is his record for the legendary axe. At least this one says there's a video, but there's not. The issue with this record is that the score only increases in 50-point increments, so this score is impossible. How about his Donkey Kong record of 15 million? First of all, what are the odds you'd get exactly 15 million in a game that increases score in 100-point increments? But whatever, I'll let that slide. Todd's record was entered as 15 million. I immediately suspected it was bogus, since the best results from professionals at the game were well under 1 million. I protested the record, and Todd claimed there were full videotapes documenting the marathon session. I wonder what happened to those. One of the refs, the same one that came up with the coffee stain excuse, that's Ron, claimed indeed there was a set of tapes. I asked one of the lead referees to investigate and verify these supposed tapes of the records. After several months, the lead ref concluded the tapes never existed and Todd's record was removed from the database. He holds the record for Wabbit with a score of 1698, but the game always goes up in increments of 5. I don't know how he didn't realize that. Like, did he not even play the game before making up his score? Also, the game automatically kills you at 1300 points, so this record is double fake. You know what? Let's just go through a bunch of Todd's records and see if we can find any patterns. Centipede, insanely better than second place. No video, verified by referee. Cosmic Arc, insanely better than second place. No video, verified by referee. Donkey Kong Jr., same exact scores as DK record. What are the odds of that? Insanely better than second place. No video, verified by referee. Good old Dragster, proven to be impossibly fast. No video, verified by referee. Galaga, insanely better than second place. No video, verified by referee. And it goes on and on and on. I just picked a few, but there are probably dozens of these. Todd still has a lot of defenders. Nearly every single argument I see defending this guy aren't debating the facts, but are arguments from authority.
The game creator thinks it's legitimate. Twin Galaxies also recognizes the competitive gamer named Todd Rogers for his recording that time of 551. Originally, this record belonged to Activision. We're talking Guinness World Record here. We're talking about Activision and Twin Galaxies.
This is a logical fallacy. Just because Twin Galaxies said he got a record, or Guinness, or Todd himself means nothing if the facts don't add up. So my question to you guys at Twin Galaxies is, why is this guy still allowed on your website? There was a man named Henning who was a top GoldenEye speedrunner, but when it was found that he had faked multiple records, they removed all his times from the elite because he had proven himself not to be trustworthy and no one could be 100% certain which runs were real. You guys know he's cheated in the past. Many of his records still standing today are under dispute. He lies repeatedly. What else do you have to do to get banned from this website? I strongly suggest if you guys want to maintain credibility, you wipe this guy's scores, or at absolute minimum, reevaluate all of them and require him to provide actual evidence.